Okay. All right, I call the meeting to order for the Services Committee meeting for Monday, September 21st, 2020. Roll call, Mayor Berman.
Here.
Steve Basco.
Here.
John Laskowski.
Present.
John Laskowski. Who else? I don't even know who else is on there.
This is Joe Quinar from EEI and Brad Sanderson from EEI Engineering.
Okay. Anybody else?
I think we got Bill Hanna too, if you didn't get him.
Oh, Bill Hanna.
Hey, Trustee Gavino.
All right. Anybody else?
And Mike, if he comes, he'll be late.
Right. Yeah, he already talked to me.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, let's prove the minutes. Dale, can you prove the minutes from August 17, 2020?
I certainly will move to approve the minutes.
Okay. I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. We'll move on to item 1, new business, Orchard Gateway STP funding presentation.
Thank you,
John,
Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Trustee Gafino. This item is going to discuss the Orchard Gateway STP project. This year, we had requested funding through CMAP and the Kane County Council of Mayors, and were awarded funding towards our Orchard Gateway road program. And when you receive federal funding, those federal funds come with some strings attached. If you use another agency's money, they ask you to kind of follow their rules and their procedures. And so tonight, EEI is going to kind of explain the differences between the engineering that goes into a federally funded project and a locally funded project. So when the contract comes before the board at the village board in the future, you can understand why the costs of the engineering are higher than they would be in a typical road program. So without, I'd like to introduce Joe then from EEI, and he's going to run through a presentation for you guys to listen to.
Hey, doing? Let me share my screen. Hopefully I can do that flawlessly.
I can see it.
Okay.
Sure.
Can everybody see it?
Yep.
All right, good. Let me see if I can. Okay. So as John, hi, my name is Joe Quinar. I'm with EEI, and also on the line is Brad Sanderson. He's also, he's the president of EEI. We're going to present here the differences between a local led project and a federally funded project with respect to Orchard Gateway. So Orchard Gateway is currently, the project limits are from Orchard Road at Orchard Gateway on the west side, and on the east it's Randall Road and Orchard Gateway. So that's our project limits. I have here labeled Hanson Boulevard and Orchard Gateway. It's an important intersection because we're planning to put a traffic signal at that intersection. So moving on to the project scope. So the scope includes a new traffic signal and turn lanes at Orchard Gateway and Hanson Boulevard. This was brought about by John, brought to us accident information from the police. And over the last 3 years, there was a total of 33 accidents on Orchard Gateway. 22 of those accidents occurred at Hanson Boulevard and Orchard Gateway. Also, putting a traffic signal in there looks to improve the traffic flow, since there's such a short distance between Orchard Road and Hanson Road along Orchard Gateway. We are predicting that there's times that potentially there is a backup, since Hanson Boulevard and Orchard Gateway is currently stop controlled. So when it's busy, there is a potential for a backup there. We're also looking at putting in new pavement from Orchard to Randall Road. Along with the new pavement, we would do curb and gutter replacement and sidewalk removal and replacement as necessary along the way, along with any drainage spot repairs that there could be. As John's introduced me, he talked about the STP funding. John did submit an STP funding application. We actually submitted 2 applications, one for the roads and intersections group of projects, and one for the asset management, which would be like a LAFO, a resurfacing project. So good news to everybody that the roads and intersections application got chosen to be on the recommended project list. So that's a good thing. Although it was at the bottom of the cutoff, it did get chosen, and it's currently slated for 1.9 million in funding for fiscal year 2024. The village requested 2.5 million. There is a potential to get more funding based on the other projects that are in the previous fiscal years. If those projects come in cheaper, then there could be more funding available for Orchard Gateway at a later date. 244,000 of that funding was for phase 3 construction engineering. The estimated total construction cost is 3.4 million. So before we move on to other aspects of the presentation, just want to do a quick explanation of the phases of the project, which are important in federal jobs. They go by 3 phases. Phase 1 being planning and preliminary design. Phase 2 is the detailed design and the contract documents and specifications, along with the right-of-way acquisition typically. And then phase 3 is your construction and your construction engineering. So now we're going to move on to the schedule, and this compares local led projects to federally funded projects. Phase 1 in a local project is typically about a half a year to a year. Sometimes we do need some permitting. It's a county permit or whatnot, is why that could vary from half a year to a year. For phase 2 in local projects, it's about a year to a year and a half. It's always, phase 2 is usually pending right-of-way acquisition, how your relationships are with the owners along the route, and how the appraisals go and whatnot. Phase 3 for local led projects is about a year to a year and a half. That always depends on the size of the project. Obviously, the longer the project or bigger, the longer it takes. Pay items that are dependent, on time, for like pavement markings and stuff, have to be laid at certain times of the year, depending on which kind you use. Punch list items, what did the contract, how good did the contractor do? Is there a lot of items left over to do in the next year because, landscaping, you couldn't get the landscaping done or whatnot. Now moving over to federally funded projects. The phase 2, you could see we highlighted it in red. It increases considerably for a phase 1 project. Sometimes in local projects, the phase 1 and phase 2 can be combined, but in federally funded projects, the phase 1 is 2 to 3 years. There's Fed meetings that you have to go to. You have to do a public hearing and whatnot, a public meeting. Phase 2 is about the same, not too much different, 1 to 2 years, and again, pending right-of-way acquisition and agreements. There's a little bit more paperwork you have to do with that. We'll get to that. Phase 3 is 1 to 2 years, the same thing, depending on size, punch list items, and items that are dependent on time. So now we're moving over to the general cost overview. Just to keep in mind that this is a general cost overview for a local and a federal project, and not necessarily geared toward Orchard Gateway itself. We just wanted to give you an idea of the ranges. With local projects, the phase 1 engineering is typically $7 to 15% of the construction cost. Phase 1 is one of the more difficult ones to compare to construction cost because it varies more than any other phase. The permitting could be different, so it varies greatly. For phase 2 in local lead projects, you're talking about 7 to 10% of the construction cost, typically based on the size and complexity of the project. Phase 3 is 10 to 12% of construction, and that also depends on the size and the length. For additional federal requirements, the phase 3, it jumps up to about 8 to 25% of the construction cost. It varies more than any other phase, just like the locally led. However, with a smaller project, which is why it reaches up to 25% of the construction cost, no matter how big the project is, you have to go through the requirements set by IDOT and the federal government. So that's why a lot of times we recommend that municipalities do not go for federally funds for some projects because they're just too small and it's not worth the money to spend on a small project. Phase 2 engineering, 7 to 12% of the construction cost. Once again, the size and complexity. And then phase 3 engineering is about 10 to 15%. And that depends on size and length also. But the big one there is IDOT documentation. So in phase 3, the construction engineer is going to have to do all the IDOT paperwork, which ends up being a considerable amount of work. So now I'm going to move on to scopes. So the scope for a phase 1 engineering for a local lead project. This one is geared toward Orchard Gateway. For the local lead project, we will have to get a Kane County permit. And the reason is that we are going to have to interconnect our traffic signal at Hanson and Orchard Gateway. It has going to be interconnected with the signal at Orchard and Orchard Gateway. So that traffic signal interconnect is going to cause us to have to do an intersection design study for Kane County. I've already spoken with Kane County and they seem to be on board, I wouldn't say on board, but receptive of the project. So that's a good thing. The good thing, local lead project, you don't have to do a project development report. In a federally funded project, you do. And it's the considerable amount of work that's involved in phase 1 for a federally funded job. Environmental submittal to governing agencies. For a local lead project, we'll just be doing that. And we do an EcoCAT submittal, which is basically an online submittal. You give them your project limits and they tell you pretty much tell you what permits you need to get. Special waste will also be done locally, although we usually have to hire a sub-consultant to help us with that. Alternate designs would be worked directly with the village. There would be no IDOT involvement. And then drainage design would be as per the village needs also with a locally led project. Now moving over to an additional federal requirements for phase 1, you have IDOT involvement and reviews. So you create a project development report, an intersection design study. All that has to go through IDOT for design approval. There's also a crash analysis that has to be done. Environmental survey requests, which includes biological, wetland, historical and cultural sign-offs, special waste, and a piece of report. So you actually have to do a piece of, which is a report that talks about the potentially impacted properties on the project that could involve having to dispose of dirt in a special location. You also have to do a tree inventory. You also have to do alternate designs per federal requirements. So it'll be in the project development report, you actually have to develop ways to potentially reduce impacts to properties and impacts to natural, wetlands and whatnot. So you have to prove to them that you looked at doing alternate designs that would help, the natural lay of the land or impacting people. Then a drainage technical memorandum will have to be done and also approved by IDOT based on IDOT and federal requirements. And then FHWA coordination and meetings. We have to present our project to the feds and IDOT at their Fed meetings. There could be one. It depends on how many comments they have. They may call you back. That's kind of up in the air depending on how they perceive the project. And then a public meeting. You have to have a public meeting. Now with the COVID, I'm not too sure. We've been trying to do online, but we're working with IDOT trying to do an online public meeting. They haven't been that receptive to it, so we'll just have to see how that plays out at the time of need for it. Then moving on to phase 2 engineering, the local lead project, right-of-way acquisition will be by whoever the village wants to do their right-of-way acquisition. The plan review will be by the village. Kane County will have to submit to Kane County for the interconnect at Hanson Boulevard, which I already stated. There's no proprietary item requests, so you can put whatever type of lights, if we were doing pavement, you can put whatever kind of pavement you want, whatever kind of curb and gutter, without having to worry about writing a letter to IDOT. Disposition of comments would just be as per village requirements. When you head over to the federal side, the right-of-way acquisition, you have to use federal requirements, federal process, IDOT land acquisition, policies and procedures. You have to have a certified appraiser. Everything has to be into the local roads by a certain date. It has to be certified and signed in order for the project to go to letting. IDOT coordination and kickoff meetings. Anytime IDOT wants to coordinate on something, you're going to be coordinating with them. There's a kickoff meeting for every project, so that's part of it. This plan submittals, there's a pre-final, there's a final, a second final, and then a bid submittal, and they will all be reviewed by IDOT. And it's a multi-departmental review, so it goes to the traffic department, to planning. It goes to all the departments. So it's usually about 6 to 7 different reviews that come in. So if you can imagine, you get comments from about 6 or 7 different people. Then you have to provide a formal disposition of comments in spreadsheets, and have to write exactly what each of your responses are, and then go back and forth until you've addressed them all. Preliminary site investigation, that has to do with the special waste and doing testing. So we'll have to go out there and do soil testing, and going back to phase 1, the PISA report I talked about will identify properties, and depending on if it, some examples are hospitals, gas stations, dealerships that use hazardous substances. Depending on how many of those you have on your project site, you will have to test your soil, and you may have to do different, you have a 662 or 663, you may have to dispose of those soils or try to keep them on site. Estimate of time, you have to come up with an estimate time of construction that IDOT will approve. Proprietary items requests if you're needed. So if you wanted to use a certain catch basin or something proprietary, you will have to write a letter to IDOT and ask for permission to use that item on the project. And then the formal disposition of comments I spoke about. Local agency agreement for federal participation. So before the project can be let, all the agreements between any local agencies, IDOT, Kane County, will have to be signed, ready to go before the project can go to letting. and then tree replacement. So IDOT has a tree replacement criteria. It used to be 1-to-1 or 1-to-1, I believe. That may have changed, but for every tree that you it's based on size too, but for every tree you cut down, you have to plant a new tree. Phase 3. So now we're moving on to phase 3 engineering. On a locally led project, it would be just meetings as required by the village. There'd be some Kane County documentation for the signal interconnect and possibly a couple reviews by Kane County. But on the federal side, you have to attend all the IDOT meetings, pre-construction conference, construction conference is had for every project. You have to follow the IDOT documentation procedures, IDOT field book entries, job box per IDOT. So you have to set up your job box as IDOT requires. Then you have to use the I-Corps database, which is the Illinois construction. That stands for the Illinois Construction Record System. So everything gets thrown into this electronic system, and it's a big database that's run by IDOT. Daily reports, quantities, calculations, all have to be done per IDOT documentation standards. Material certifications, change orders. The staff you have on the project has to know the IDOT documentation procedures. Weekly reports to IDOT forms and submittals, and we know there's a lot of those. IDOT traffic control and inspection reports. You have to do some in the daytime and some at night. And then IDOT closeout paperwork. So as you can see, there's a lot of things added to the phase 3 when you do an IDOT federally funded job. So in summary, just a quick summary, local projects, you got village involvement. On the STP federal side, you have IDOT involvement, design approvals, documents. On the local side, we're gonna have Kane County permit. There will be a Kane County review on the federal side. Intersection design study for both. One because of Kane County, the other because it's required, especially for a signalized intersection. And, we may be adding turn lanes to that intersection too, which is worth mentioning, especially the eastbound left turn lane. Environmental submittals. That's a lot more for a federally funded project because you have to submit it through IDOT and they review each piece, so that there's a lot of time involved in that. And then if they have questions, then you have to resubmit. Right-of-way acquisition by the village, that's all you'd be in control of that. For federally funded project, it's, you got to follow the process, and it can take some time. Local projects are less restrictive, more flexible. On a big one on the STP side is the public meeting. A public meeting is, it takes some work, and, it's, then you got to answer all the questions that the public has, and that all goes into the project development report. The schedule, the start of phase 1 to completion of construction is 2.5 to 4 years, whereas phase 1 federally funded project to complete from phase 1 to completion is about 4 to 7 years. And to be honest with you, I've seen them go longer than that. The cost on a local side, its total cost is about 24 to 37% of construction cost. On the federal side, it's about 25 to 52%. But like I said, those costs are really geared toward Orchard Gateway. It's more of a general guidance. On the local side, no QBS selection process is needed. If QBS is where you have to put out an RFQ to other firms to hire your consultants. For phase 2 and phase 3 only, in federal jobs, it is required. So a QBS is required for federally funded projects for phase 2 and phase 3. So that's about all I have. If anyone has any questions, feel free.
Any questions? I don't have any. It's quite a process. Dale?
Well, you know, majority of the project is resurfacing an existing road. It's the intersection that obviously is requiring all the work and the money.
Correct.
We're very fortunate to get the money from the through the county, and you know, it's nice. It would be nice if we got the 2.5 million, but what we're getting is good, and it may be more when the time comes. So who knows? But, you know, I've sat on a committee for a number of years, and certainly John is there every meeting, but he works more behind the scenes, and certainly EEI is involved in the whole thing too, representing us and representing others. So it's but I think it seems to be a fair way of spreading the money out. It's just these federal projects are just, they get me.
Did anyone catch that there's going to be, they're looking at a double left turn lane eastbound? That's, I believe, going on to Hanson Boulevard. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if it'll be a double turn lane, but it'll definitely be a single.
You know, they forced us into a double on Oak Street in Orchard. You know, it hadn't been, maybe the next 20 years will be used. Who knows?
Well, that one causes a problem because people on that inside lane, they just cut off the people on the outside lane. They go north on a deer path. So that was a kind of a flub. I think that was bad. So I travel that all the time. That's kind of dangerous because if people race around that, to be the first one on the inside lane, they cut back over, they go northbound on deer path. So that's, yeah, I don't think that's good. So I like a one turn lane is fine. So, all right, item 2.
We're not engineers. That's, you know.
Item 2, John.
Thank you, Trustee Gaffino. I'm going to try to share my screen here, and we'll get started with the annual road program presentation. This presentation is just going to contain a little review of what the process we go through to select the neighborhoods and roads we look at, and then kind of just explain what neighborhoods we're going to be sharing or working on this year. Can everybody see my screen at this point?
Yep.
Okay. So just to kind of refresh your memory a little bit, the way we kind of go about determining which streets we are going to target for maintenance is by referencing our PCI study. It was our Pavement Condition Index study. And this study was used to assign a numerical value to each street in town. And then once each street had a numerical value, it became a little bit easier to group the streets into streets that would need maintenance, and then the short term, middle term, and then long term. And we use that data and we group streets into maintenance areas. The process includes reviewing it at a staff level and with our consulting engineers, and trying to make sure that the neighborhoods we select do make sense. Based on those neighborhood areas, then we prepare cost estimates, which are based on the street characteristics, and they're used for budgeting purposes and trying to forecast the future maintenance we'll be doing. One of the considerations we also look at this time is if there's any utility repairs need to be made. So we'll talk with Fox Metro and see if they have any sanitary sewer mains in the area. We'll review our own sanitary sewer mains and determine if the TV logs indicate we need to do some more in-depth reconstruction. Then we'll talk with Paul Young over in the water division and see what his thoughts are on the water main for the streets that we're going to be working on. And then the next step's basically the doing step. Then we perform that maintenance annually. After we do our annual maintenance program, we begin the next part of the process. This is kind of a cycle. We just reassess the road network annually. And what we've been doing internally is kind of taking that initial PCI study that we had 3 years ago, and we began kind of degrading those numbers or decaying them some to try to forecast what the road system will look like over time. And the PCI study is done about every 4 years, and the purpose of that study is kind of to calibrate the guesses that we've been making in between, on the in-between years. And the next time we're going to have a PCI study is scheduled for fiscal year 21-22, so it's coming up shortly here. The pavement condition index that we use rates the streets from 0 to 100, and it groups them into 7 different categories. The maintenance strategy associated with each group is shown in this table, and typically the streets that we've been targeting are in the poor, very poor, and serious category. So we've been doing mill and overlays, some base repair and mill and overlays, partial reconstructions, and then we've even done some full and partial, or partial and full reconstructions as well. As I move on to the maps in the next couple slides, kind of keep in mind the color scheme here. The good streets are kind of in the blue, green, and yellow. And then the streets that are in worse condition are kind of various shades of red. So you have the red, maroon, and purple. And when you take a look at, this is the pavement condition index map from 2019. I'm not sure how well the colors come through. The bigger the screen, the easier to see it. But what you can kind of gather from the 2019 map is that the central part of the town, basically in between Orchard and almost Route 31, is in pretty good condition. We've just done a lot of work over on White Oak. And those streets are blue. In kind of Magnolia and Juniper area is blue. You can see over on the east side of town, things are starting to turn a little bit more red and orange. And these are the areas that are going to start needing more attention then to get those streets back into good repair. And then on the far west side of town, you kind of notice that these streets are in the middle category and probably be targeted maybe in the near term or a little bit longer term for maintenance. So as you look at this map, you can compare it to the next slide, which is going to be the 2020 pavement condition index. And as we switch to that slide, you kind of see that the reds intensify over on the east side. So those are streets that have the lower PCIs and are really being to demonstrate that they need some attention. The central area of town still remains in pretty good shape with the blues, yellows, and greens. There are some areas that are beginning to show here and there that they may need maintenance. And if we look out west again, the roads are again now starting to express themselves in a way that kind of expresses the distresses that they're feeling right now. So the next slide is going to give us a little bit of history of what we've done from 2017 up till this point. And if you take a look, in 2017, we did the blue section here for a cost of $1.4 million. The blue roads highlighted. Then we moved out a little bit further west and did the roads highlighted in red, came back and caught this, picked up a street over here to complete that neighborhood. Finished up over in the White Oak neighborhood in 2019 with a $1.1 million project. And then just this year, we jumped over to the east side and picked up some of the roads on the east side and also targeted Maple and Elm, which had issues with the water main. So not only was the pavement condition bad, but this was an area where there were some lead service lines identified. And so we we took that opportunity while the pavement was bad to also replace those problematic water services. So now if you look to the right side of the map, you're going to see the areas that we're targeting for the near future. In 2021, we're looking at trying to get the roads here in Pine Creek. In 2022, we were scheduling the longer trunk line of Pine Creek. And the purpose of the way we were ordering this was, from a construction perspective, it made more sense to do the streets that were kind of on the periphery of Pine Creek. And then rather than drive through Pine Creek with all the construction traffic on a following year, we would just we'd do Pine Creek second, so we didn't have trucks all over it, is basically the short answer. And then kind of keeping in the theme of the east side, we moved to the north end into the Hartfield Estates up on the northwest side of, or northeast side of town. And in 2023, that project was forecast at about $1.7 million. And that kind of would complete the entire east side on the north side of Route 56. And then in 2024, we started taking a hard look at Chesterfield. And all of Chesterfield's beginning to show signs of distress as well, but it's still kind of isolated. Well, it's still in good shape, and we figured that it would make a little bit more sense to kind of do Chesterfield on its own, where it's kind of isolated from the other three neighborhoods. So we'd be impacting all the residents north of Butterfield in 3 consecutive years, and then we'd be out of those neighborhoods and would try to minimize the inconvenience that they would sustain that way, as opposed to doing 1 or 2 projects up north of Butterfield and then jumping to Chesterfield, then going back up north again to complete the east side. In fiscal year 2025, we're kind of beginning to think that we're going to head back out west of Orchard into Tanner Trails. There's a lot of roads there. It's going to be a large sum of money, and so we haven't exactly targeted which particular streets we're going to do or the order that they're going to make, but they're going to take. But from 2025 on, we forecast that we'll be spending quite a bit of time and money out there. And then the next 2 slides we're going to see are just kind of a close-up view of the neighborhoods that we are targeting. The view is going to flip, and north is now going to be to your left. And that was done just because it'd be easier to view the roads. So again, these are the neighborhoods that we're looking at for 2021 through 2024. And to kind of even get a closer view of things, we limited it to 21 through 23. And so again, we're kind of targeting the areas in the orange section that's highlighted in orange. Those roads do have some bad curb and gutter, as well as some deteriorating pavement conditions. The pavement is about the same as the pink area, but the curb and gutter is much worse in the orange area. And again, to kind of keep the construction traffic off of the areas we just paved, we chose that the orange section would go ahead of the pink neighborhood. So included in the annual road program activities are basically tree trimming. We try to identify any unique resident concerns in the area. We begin our maintenance activities with road resurfacing, sidewalk removal and replacement, curb and gutter restoration, curb and gutter removal and replacement, restoration, and any underground repairs that might occur. Other activities that we also include in the annual road program are crack filling, and that's done on roads that are 2 to 6 years old, and pavement striping occurs just about every other year. And we'll be doing that. Actually, pavement striping will be coming up probably in the spring of 2021. To look the road characteristics that we did select in the orange neighborhood, their median PCI score was a 32. That's categorized as a very poor. These roads demonstrate significant need for maintenance. The program this year addresses roads that have a significant amount of road alligator cracking and a significant amount of curb deterioration, especially on Lindsay Circle. This year's program is estimated at $1.9 million for 2.8 million miles of road maintenance activities. And again, this is just a summary of the roads in the program, their PCI scores in 2018, and then how staff chose to degrade them over time. And as you can see, if you chose to look at, say, Bede Court here, you can see the transition that the road makes from poor to very poor over time as it degrades over those 2 years. And the average road PCI of that, of the neighborhoods in 2018, 2019, and 2020 continues to deteriorate. And that's the annual road program presentation. So at this time, I'd just like to entertain any questions you might have.
Yeah, I got one, or just explanation, I guess. So the 1.9 for 2021, that doesn't include any storm sewer items that come out of the waterworks fund, or is the 1.9 just really curb and gutter and some sidewalk? Is that pretty much the 1.9 covers?
Yeah, that's going to be mostly, there's not going to be any underground utilities with this one. It'll be curb gutter, sidewalk removal, some storm sewer replacement. And this year might be a little different with the funding mechanisms. We're still working through it with the finance department, Bill Hanna and Steve Bosco, discussing if we're going to use some MFT fundings this year towards the street maintenance program.
That area.
So the 1.9 does include storm sewer repair then?
Yeah, it's going to include point source storm sewer, like catch basins and stuff like that.
I got you. All right, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That was very good, very concise. A lot of good details.
Thank you.
Mayor Berman, anything?
Very good. You know, our CPI, or that, I'll tell you what, it's smart that we've gone into that, and it's great to be able to present it out into the future. And that shows you we're really on top of things.
Yeah. Trustee Lowry joined us. Trustee Lowry, I know.
No, thank you. I just joined in. I didn't get enough of the conversation to be able to make any contribution to it. So,
Thanks, sir.
Sorry. Just a couple of quick things, very quick. That area with the orange with the curb, that was one of the areas that inspired our curb policy that we came to the board with because of how many curbs deteriorated in that area. We needed a stopgap to try to figure out how to get people's curbs to be better structured, so to speak, so they weren't crumbling until we can get it to a road program. So we ended up with a policy that came out of that neighborhood, which is why it doesn't look like you're getting as much road, but it's more expensive. The other thing too, the PCI study has been very effective, and we're actually going to step it up a little bit sooner. Instead of doing it every 4 years and using some kind of algorithm or whatever where we try to degrade the roads on our own, we're thinking of actually doing the PCI study every 3 years to try to get an even more accurate depiction. But the other thing too is, no matter what, the staff still drives the roads. EEI takes a look at the roads when they're designing the program. The village engineer that we just hired that should be starting in October, they'll all still take visual. So it's not just us looking at paperwork. I mean, they do go out there and verify if the codes do match what the scores say in person when they're actually visualizing it. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was there's also little areas. So I don't want people to think that some of those areas like Oak Hill, which was red on the map but wasn't mentioned in any of the upcoming programs. We always have a targeted number of dollars that we try to put towards our road program. And it's a good number in comparison, I think, to other towns. But what we end up doing is we try to stay in neighborhoods piece by piece so that we're not jumping back and forth. We try to, do one area and piggyback on it the next year so that you're in and you're out for 20 years. But what we do is when there's a little bit of money in the program, if we have a little extra money or if we think something's going to come in under budget, a lot of times we'll pick a one-off, we call it. So a small neighborhood or a small group of roads that we think we can afford to fit in so they don't have to wait another 5 to 10 years if they need it right away. We did that with Summer Wind just 2 years ago. That's it.
Sounds good.
Okay. Any other comments? No, nothing heard. No motion to adjourn.
So,
Motion to adjourn.
second,
All in favor?
aye.
Aye. Very
See you
good.
in a
Thank
few
you.
minutes.